When you look at the impact that music has on human health, you see great benefits in making music, listening to music, engaging creatively in the field of music. Um, at the same time, this relatively straightforward knowledge is not practiced by a lot of people. And I see there tremendous potential for us to bridge this gap and to bring the positive benefit that music has to as many people as possible.
But I go back to the 1947 definition of health that WHO has in its constitution, which says that health is not merely the absence of disease and conditions, it's the attainment of the highest level of physical, mental, and social well-being. In my view, the arts are not complementary to health. The arts are a health behavior, just like nutrition and exercise. To be able to express yourself freely and creatively is part of what makes you a complete human.
Good afternoon and welcome to the 7th Global BHP Brain Trust Dialogue. Today we embark on an exciting journey at the intersection of music, arts and brain health. The dynamic role of music and art is validated as having a profound impact on the brain as therapies for pain, anxiety, depression and loneliness. For Alzheimer's patients, which is very close to my heart, music offers more than just moments of connection and comfort. It serves as a lifeline, providing comfort to the families who witness its transformative effects firsthand. Recognizing these positive impacts is essential, that we come together to familiarize ourselves with cutting-edge research and practical strategies for leveraging the power of the arts in fostering brain health across the lifespan. Our lineup of guests brings a wealth of diverse expertise to enrich our dialogue. I'm excited to welcome René Fleming, world-renowned soprano, and we have asked Christopher Bailey, co-founder of the World Health Organization's Healing Art Initiative, to share why René was their choice for WHO Global Ambassador for the Arts and Health. Here, a short video message.
Renee has been a leader in this space for many years before she became connected with WHO, with her work with the NIH, the Kennedy Center, the Sound Health Network, and her music and mind sessions that she has done on her concert tours. But I think her connection with WHO has had a galvanizing effect. And it's more than just spreading the science. She exemplifies it in her performance, because when we talk about the experience of creative expression, the way she physically, emotionally, and completely connects with an audience is exactly what we're talking about, that flow state, that sense of well-being. So it's more than just her words, it's her actions.
What a nice statement. René, welcome and thank you very much for joining us. It's a great honor to have you with us today, and everyone in the audience is looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with you.
Let me start with the first question, which, by the way, also interests me personally a lot. So how did your personal experiences within your career inspire you to look into the music impact and also the scientific connection between music and brain and mental health? And I think in one of your interviews, you actually said that you were sort of affected by stage fright early in your career. So how did these techniques which you learned over a year help you to calm and relax your mind and body and make you the star you are today?
Well, definitely stage fright and somatic pain. So pain was another symptom of my anxiety, performance anxiety, were what led me to reading at length about the mind-body connection, what scientists were discovering about how our minds have a strong effect on the body. And that's when I happened to also notice that researchers were looking at music and studying music as for intervention, for the science that was occurring, and especially with the gains in technology. That's what's made a huge difference.
So, I mean, now we start, actually, I have to say, to understand the brain much better. We have now methodology to actually measure positive and negative impacts on the brain. So I know you were quite scientifically working with the NIH, trying to look into brain imaging and other technologies to really assess and understand better the connection between the brain and the music and the creative process behind it. So what can we learn? What do we actually understand scientifically? What makes us happy, and how does the brain react to this happiness?
So, I mean, I knew intrinsically all artists understand this because we have, in my case, a lifetime of experience also with audiences who come and speak with me after performances and say, your music got me through loss, cancer, the loss of a parent or a child. And so these were the best reviews I can get. But when I participated myself in an fMRI experiment at the National Institutes of Health, then we start to really look at what's happening in the brain. And the experiment had me singing, imagining singing, and speaking. And imagining singing was the most powerful of all three of those activities. And what I find extraordinary is that I now know that music is in every known mapped area of the brain. That it is so complex in terms of processing what it is that we do when we engage with music, that of course then the benefits are, because of the long history that we have in evolution, of course, is the key, that we can begin to use these and understand them with rigorous research in terms of the benefits in healthcare. And I do think that the arts will ultimately be embedded in healthcare.
So what's your brain? I mean, maybe that's a personal question, but I ask it anyway. Did your brain show different NMR signals from other brains when you were singing? Or was it equal to other images? Were you special, in other words?
I think Gottfried Schlauch did an experiment actually to try and look at musicians' brains, and he ultimately said, no, there's nothing special. I do know that learning an instrument for a child will have lasting changes in the brain after just 2 years. So there's no question that instrumental music has been studied for a long time, and there are a lot of studies now on singing as well, and especially singing in choirs. So there are tremendous benefits, but they weren't looking at my brain with that in mind. They were simply comparing these three activities, and they did say unequivocally that imagining the songs in the experiment activated way more in my brain than the other two activities. But they said, you're a singer, Renee, so singing is second nature to you. And I wish they had followed up the experiment with a non-singer. It would have been interesting to see if it was different.
Yeah, I'm sure it would be, because it's a sort of a personal experience, and I want to come back to this question when we afterwards speak with Rudy, if in fact there is really a scientific basis for that. But I was actually looking at your book, Music and Mind, reading it, not fully yet, but I'm in the middle. So you did a lot of research together with NIH in trying to figure out how brain and science are linked together. And so I think for our audience today, it would be extremely interesting, and maybe you can even make some recommendations to understand what are the interesting learnings from this relatively hardcore science done at NIH, and what can we as an audience, as a normal consumer, sort of utilize from your experience and you summarized it in a book, and we would be super interested in learning what we can do.
Well, I always suggest to people, there are 41 chapters written by artists, researchers, institutions. We talk about the future. We talk about, the state of the therapeutic world, and even into dance and visual arts and architecture. So what I suggest is that you start with both evolution, Ani Patel's chapter on evolution, because that really explains a lot about the power of it. And then I would suggest next neuroanatomy with Dan Levitin, or Nina Kraus on sound, on hearing. But this kind of gives the foundation for understanding why this is powerful. But therapeutically, the strong pillars are for childhood development, mental health, disorders of aging. These are really some of the power. Pain is another huge pillar of research right now, and it's so important, obviously. But the interventions that work for therapeutically in terms of what an arts therapist would do, or a music therapist, have to do with melodic intonation therapy. So if one has a stroke and you can quickly work with a music therapist, you have a really good chance of regaining speech through the plasticity of the brain. And of course, I love this, by singing, because speech lives in Broca's area and singing is in a different part of the brain and can very often be untouched by the stroke. Or the traumatic brain injury, et cetera. So that's one strong area. And disorders of movement are also very powerful. Parkinson's, MS, again, brain injury with difficulty in movement, that rhythm, which is also the basis for speech, but rhythm can really help people move fluidly and gracefully again. But what's important is that the NIH, the National Institutes of Health in the US, is now funding this research. They put $40 million into it so far. They will continue to fund it. And this really changes the game, because we need a rigorous body of research to kind of support science in this. And I also have just myself funded investigator awards for young scientists who work with an artist. So again, creating a pipeline. And I think the FNIH will follow this up with fellowships. So that is crucial, actually, because our system really requires this rigorous scientific support.
Yeah, I fully agree with you. I have two more questions. You mentioned pain actually twice now. So what do we know about music and pain? What sort of relief can we get from the music? Is it distracting you just, or what does music do to pains?
So I have a friend who actually had a serious brain bleed recently, not an aneurysm, but a different type. And she was in excruciating pain. They said she couldn't look at screens, that she had to, the lights had to be off, et cetera. Try listening to music. Well, the only thing that relieved her pain was Jimi Hendrix, as loud as she could possibly play it. And anytime the volume came down or the music went off, the pain came back. So I sent this to a neurologist that I know and said, what do you make of this? And they sent me back a study that showed a photograph, like a picture in the brain of very strong pain that had big red lines around the outside of it. And then that same spot listening to music, and those red lines were gone. So in other words, the pain was clearly reduced. It could be seen in the brain. So there's a lot of research kind of looking at this now. And because we have a horrible opioid crisis in the US, and I'm sure elsewhere, it's important to look at these potential, this is something that's, and by the way, we make opioids naturally in the brain. So trying to kind of get those to fire up and not have something that's pharmaceutical or intervention or that kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, how true is this? And of course, my conviction is that at the end, you need both, at least in certain diseases. You need the the soft aspects like music and diet and you need the medication, unfortunately. But I have one more question for you, which interests me in particular. It's also obviously the audience is very much made of women. Is there a difference how women and men react to things like music? Do they show different impulses, different NMRs?
So unfortunately, in our society and system, women were not really carefully studied, as different from men. In fact, they weren't even really until recently used in studies because the hormonal issue was sort of too complex, I guess, for people. So I find that so unfortunate, given that we're more than half the population. So the answer is I really don't know, because I doubt that we have been separated by gender as we look at some of these issues. And plus, as I said, it's quite new. And it's all about technology. The fact that we can now measure with fMRI, with EEG, and with other measurements, then we can really have validation for all of this, and hopefully they would begin to look at differences in gender.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, obviously for us it's a big aspect, because as you know, 70% of the Alzheimer patients are women, and 70% of the caregivers are women. So to have a particular emphasis on women for us as a group is super important, and so to have more clarity scientifically supported would be very, very important. And I do hope that NIH is looking at this aspect as well.
Agreed.
Thank you, Renee. This was just the start. Now I'm thrilled to introduce our next guest, Dr. Rudy Tansi, true rock star of science. And I'm using my words very carefully. We have met in the past, not as a rock star, but as scientists. So really beyond your scientific achievements, which of course are very known to me, but what I was less exposed to were the other side of your life, which is in fact that you are trying to bridge the gap between science and public understanding through books, through best-selling books like The Super Brain, co-authored with Deepak Chopra, media appearances, and more. And I have to admit, my learning over the last years, being so tightly linked to the Alzheimer field, is that communication, talking about this disease, talking about the hope linked to this disease is very important. And what you can do besides just medication, which until last year we didn't have. So it's remarkable that you actually go really with both routes. One is a scientist, and then the other one is the communication to the public. But then there's a third part, which is in fact that you're a very talented musician. I have to say I've never been in a concert, but I heard that you were playing with artists like Aerosmith and others. So that's certainly something I would like to have at some point. So welcome. Thank you for joining. I know you and Rennie know each other very well. So let me start by a question. You are really one of these rare individuals with a dual career, scientist and musician. So how could you explain your perception, your knowledge of a connection between music and cognitive health? And is it actually, when we speak about the help music does to the brain, to pains, to loneliness, and is it a positive cognitive, maybe childhood event which we remember, or is it that it has a direct impact on the brain? So really, what are we talking about? What is this connection between music and science?
Well, Chris, thanks so much for having me here, and it's such a thrill to share the virtual stage, so to speak, with Renee Fleming and all of you. And I have to say, although I play with Aerosmith and those guys, I did have one chance to play with Renee once a few years ago, and we did Hallelujah together and that was a real thrill. I have to say that I still watch the video of that performance. It gives me goosebumps every time. So that was amazing. And I think Renee covered a lot of what you just asked eloquently earlier, but I'll just add that, you know, the two major categories of how music affects cognitive health are relaxation, and stimulation. So if you have someone who's depressed, apathetic, and they need to be stimulated again, or bring their mood back. If you play music that this person loved between about 13 years old, or let's say 12 years old and 25 years old, that's the music that is emotionally, that you're emotionally bonded with, right? So if you look at the music memory parts of the brain, the parts of the brain that get activated with music, they're very close to the limbic system. The hippocampus, which is affected in Alzheimer's, short-term memory and emotion, amygdala for emotion. So there's this tight, physical link between emotion, short-term memory, and music. So stimulation, let's say you're a late-stage Alzheimer's patient, and slightly vegetative, and the family wants to wake you up and have some more time with you. You play music from when they're in their teens, and even if it's music they don't like, it will stimulate the brain and wake them up. But the other side of the story is, let's say for folks who are suffering from anxiety, or just obsessive behavior about the past, or anxiety about the future, music is incredibly relaxing. This could also be an Alzheimer's disease, where in the early stages, it's terrible for a patient. The frustration, the agitation, they can't find who they are. They can't find the memories they had. I mean, it's a terrible experience, especially in those early days. And music can provide a relaxation, can quell some of that agitation in a loved one who's distraught about having this disease, and realizing they have the disease before the later stages come on.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So what can you actually measure in the brain? I'm a pretty hardcore scientist. So what do you actually see in the NMR, or can you even use PET imaging on certain neurotransmitters? What do you see actually in the brain when you get positive emotional activity and activation?
Yeah, well, I mean, you're well versed with functional MRI. So, and Renee, I think, did Renee experience the functional MRI aspect? I was following this. I think you did. So you can actually see, of course, what parts of the brain light up when you're listening to music or performing music.
Mm-hmm.
But also, glucose utilization, looking at energy utilization, which neurons are using the most energy while you're listening to music or performing music. And this is how we've defined the music memory parts of the brain. But what's remarkable, I saw Stephen Dukoski among the attendees, who really knows this well, that in the brain, the music memory parts of the brain are remarkably spared. As Alzheimer's, marches through the brain, you hear the stories about in a nursing home, the woman who's in the late stages of Alzheimer's. She can't remember the names of the songs she's playing, but you tell her to play a song or get her going, and she'll play the song perfectly. It's amazing how we don't forget words of songs, like remembering lyrics. When I was forced to sing in my bands, and believe me, you don't want me to sing, but sometimes you had to give the lead singer a break. But I remember every lyric I sang back to my teens. Like, how is that possible? So this is a different part of the brain that stores those memories.
Yeah. Coming back a little bit more to the scientific part, what we want to give to the audience is, of course, something which we can do for prevention of diseases, for dealing with pains and anxiety, etc. So here the question is, how does actually the SHIELD method, which you described and referred to, how does it actually work? And how can this SHIELD methodology help to deal with some of these mental issues? And just as a last point, I'm personally very convinced that the sort of lifestyle aspects, which includes exercise, diet, etc., are equally important to medication, which we hopefully will have for certain of these diseases. So maybe you can explain to the audience what they can do now using methods like the SHIELD.
Yeah, thank you. So the history of SHIELD is when I wrote the third book with Deepak Chopra, The Healing Self, and we had an action plan for what you can do day to day to try to minimize inflammation in the body and in the brain. Because in the brain, like in Alzheimer's, it initiates with certain misfolded proteins like plaques and tangles. But at the end of the day, neuroinflammation is causing the most damage. And you can have inflammation acutely or chronically your whole life as you age, depending on your lifestyle. So when I had to encapsulate this lifestyle, I came up with SHIELD, where S is sleep. So try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, even if that means a power nap. Every time you come out of dream sleep into deep sleep, I call it a rinse cycle for the brain. Your brain gets rid of the amyloid plaque and other debris that can cause problems later on. Now, where music comes in is, I think, is the H, how to handle stress. So handling stress, some people meditate, some people pray, some people just take time to be mindful about their expectations. But, music can do a great job for managing stress. And I think that's most relevant to H and SHIELD. I is interaction with others, interaction meaning, meaningful, non-stressful, good interactions. And that can include listening to music together, or if your musicians playing music together. But loneliness is a risk factor for Alzheimer's. E, as you mentioned, is exercise. Exercise induces the breakdown of amyloid. It causes the birth of new nerve cells in the brain, neurogenesis, especially in the region of the brain that's affected in Alzheimer's, the hippocampus. And L is learning new things. And so I take it upon myself every weekend, I learn music and play music that I never played before. So for my L, besides, our jobs as researchers, we're learning things all the time. Even in your hobby, you can choose to not do the same thing over and over again, but choose something new. Every time you make new synapses, I like to say that's the more synapses you can lose before you lose it. Because in Alzheimer's, it's loss of synapses, the connections between neurons that leads to disease. And finally, diet. And it's very simple on diet. Any diet that keeps your gut microbiome, bacteria happy. So fiber, plant-based diet, vegetables, fruits, seeds, whole grains. I like to say anything crunchy that's not a potato chip or hard candy or a crispy French fry. The gut microbiome loves crunchy things. And I just want to tell you that Dean Ornish and I just finished a lifestyle intervention trial. It was really Dean's Ornish's trial. He's famous for the heart-based diet. And the paper's in press. And remarkably, treating Alzheimer patients with a vegan-based, plant-based diet, actually, I couldn't believe it, actually led to significant improvement in cognition using the standard Alzheimer cognitive scores. And also, it was indicative of amyloid reduction in the brain using a blood test. And that there was a CNN special about it on Sunday, and the paper will be out soon. So that says just a good plant-based vegan diet, plus they meditated, sleep, exercise, led to improvement. So what you said before is absolutely correct.
Super. Just one last question. Does it really matter what type of music we listen to? Is classic better than hard rock? Or I had to promise my collaborator, is heavy metal music doing the same thing?
I think it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for relaxation, it's going to probably be more classical and easy listening music. If you're looking to stimulate yourself and get going, or you're exercising, you're working out, you might want to listen to something more rhythmic and more pop or rock. But it's all what you like. It's what makes you happy in the end. And I do have to say, I do know some rock musicians who have gone to nursing homes and used rhythm. Renee mentioned rhythm, not just for Parkinson patients where rhythm helps, but just getting older folks who are not very, very interactive, hearing the same rhythm or banging drums together can really unite them and cause a great experience as well. So I think it's whatever makes you happy, and whether you're looking to relax or be stimulated.
Super. René, just a short question to you. When you listen to Rudy, coming from the scientific side, what creative characteristics do the arts and sciences have in common? And how do we bring them even more together to potentially have even a bigger impact on what we learned or are learning about music and the mind?
Well, we have a lot in common. I think it's this notion of inquiry. You know, the creative spirit and the creative process are the same. I would say, you know, every time I try to think about how I'm going to create a program for the audience that pleases everybody, or if I'm improvising, and you know, and the odd jazz concert that I do, which is a very specific kind of skill for the brain, or frankly, just coming, it's an advisor that I am for the Kennedy Center, LA Opera, and some of the other organizations I've been advisor for. I'm coming from the outside and looking in. So I ask questions that people who are on the ground doing the work every day sometimes overlook. So I think it's the collaboration that can be really useful. That's why I'm funding investigator awards for scientists who pair with an artist, and it's called the NeuroArts Blueprint Investigator Awards, and it's between Johns Hopkins and the Aspen Institute. And we have found young scientists who are interested in this and who really want to explore it, and their proposals are off the charts.
Great. I think this would be a very good discussion to have also with Matthias Röder. Matthias Röder is the managing director of the Karajan Institute in Salzburg. And and we're very much focused on the future of music using new technology, including AI technologies and innovation. So it's how to create the next generation of music, but still having the benefit. And we're really looking and doing a lot for young people, singers and musicians. So I think this would be a very, very nice discussion. We have asked Matthias to actually respond to this question, and here's his short video.
We often associate creativity with artistic endeavors. And we associate creativity with this spark of genius and ideas that suddenly emerge. And while all of that is true, that these are some of the profound creative moments, creativity can also be found in everyday kind of problem solving or in scientific problem solving. Whenever we are faced with a problem that we don't immediately know the solution to, our mind starts to get into a creative mode. And this creative mode is not limited to the arts. It is often found in the sciences, in everyday problems that we're solving, in even communication. So to recognize this fact is, I think, extremely powerful for everyone's life.
Very nice message. I'm sure, René, you're in Salzburg quite often, so happy to organize a meeting with him, and it's really impressive what we do for young people.
Thank you.
Rudy, now I'm coming from the other side. So far, I've more talked about the science, but now taking your musical part of your career, how did this influence your science? In other words, are there techniques which you use in composing, etc., which you then use in the scientific part to get new ideas, new experiments, innovation, which you potentially otherwise would not have had?
You know, in the word research, there are two syllables. There's re and search. And you need both. Like the re is that we're looking at the research that's already been done. We build on it and we try to do something new. In music, it's similar, right? When you're writing music, you're always conditioned by the music you already know and have heard and that you love, but you're trying to do something new. In both cases, music and research, I'll just say the folks who are most successful, the folks who change the world, are the ones who are less derivative, right? They build on what they already know in science or music, but they go out of their way to clear their mind and do something original, to really come up with something that's one part intuition, one part logic. And I think that's when the magic comes in writing music, and that's when the magic comes when you get excited about a new idea in research. It's the creative process, and not being too derivative and not being afraid to reach out and be a little bit more, out on a limb to do something new.
Yeah, so the re part. René, how can we assure? I mean, I think we start, as you nicely said at the beginning, we start really to understand scientifically, also what's happening in the brain when we listen to music, to songs, etc., which is really exciting. We always knew that there is something, but now we are starting to understand it and to describe it and put it into scientific papers. So having all this knowledge, how can we actually now maximize the therapeutic potential of music and arts to promote the brain health and prevent, obviously, again, very close to my heart, diseases like Alzheimer? What can we do in addition to what we're doing right now to really help people with such diseases? I know we're at the beginning, but how can we do more?
Well, I think besides emphasizing more of the research on how music positively affects the brain, I think we can also, in terms of clinical practice, remind doctors that when they talk to their patients about their overall brain care, their overall mental well-being, their brain health, to remind them that music can be very powerful for promoting mental well-being, for promoting brain health, reducing stress, which is a big killer in the brain. And at the McCann Center for Brain Health that I direct at Mass General, we have a brain care score we use. And part of the questions involve what do you do for hobbies? And, and maybe we could add one there. How often do you listen to music? That's not on the score yet, but I think it could be. And I think if every patient, and when they're doing it doesn't matter what they're in for, if every doctor who's seeing a patient can just ask them about their well-being and remind them of the benefits of music, that would be a great start.
I think, personally, I think we need stars like you, like Renee, who actually speak about it and make people aware. I think it's very important. Renee, maybe a short statement by you. When I go to these homes with Alzheimer patients, I sometimes come out totally frustrated because there is no stimulation of the brain. There is no stimulation of anything. So how can we bring this into these memory clinics, et cetera, and make people better?
I definitely think that families and should be asking anytime they go, do you have creative arts therapists here? Because I really want to be in a program where my loved one is stimulated in that way, because it brings also joy to the families to see them return to themselves. They have moments of lucidity when they're engaged with music that they knew when they were young. It really works. Or when they're in drumming circle is a fabulous idea as well, because they shouldn't be treated as people to simply park and leave, just allow them to stay there. So there's no question. And in our system, of course, there's a cost involved. And a licensing, a kind of a certification process that has to take place state by state. So we have a long way to go. There are only 12 states right now that have given this licensure to creative arts therapists. Then it's dissemination from the research to doctors who also start to say, hey, this works. I really want to be able to provide this for my patients. Right now, it's philanthropically covered, but it's very low cost. It's non-pharmaceutical and non-invasive. It's definitely and an economic 3-to-1 return on investment, especially for aging, for elder care facilities. There's a whole ecosystem of people, including the providers, the healthcare providers, but caregivers, families, and the patient, who are all benefited tremendously by having arts in these places.
I hope a lot of people are listening to us today, and we will certainly distribute this dialogue today. I really hope it has a huge impact on how people are looking at this in the future. And now, thank you, both of you. I'm now looking forward to a dialogue between my co-chair, Mara Henk-Morey, and his guest, Megan Bayer. Mara, hand over to you.
Thank you so much, Andrea. And hi, everyone. Next, we'll explore the significant role of diplomatic platforms in leveraging this therapeutic power of music and arts that we've been talking about today. So there's no one better equipped for this discussion than our next guest, Megan Bayer. She is the director of the Office of Art and Embassies at the U.S. Department of State. Megan, welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mara. It's been fascinating. And it also makes sense to hear all the science behind the power of the arts, which is something that we here at Art and Embassies practice every day and have been doing for the last 60 years.
Yes, definitely. And you and I had a talk last week, and as the program's director, please tell our listeners a little bit about Art in the Embassies, its mission, and why President John F. Kennedy started it way back in the 60s, which is quite amazing and quite innovative from him.
Well, I would say Kennedy had an intuitive feeling about the arts and how powerful they were. And he may well have seen it as a young man when his father was ambassador, how important the art in that embassy residence was in helping his father sort of talk about our American values, our American story. And so he created this office because he understood that art could make you feel what a diplomat can only try to make you understand. And feeling is the beginning of a connection, which is the gold standard in diplomacy. And so what our office does is we will meet with every ambassador over the course of a president's administration. There are 200 ambassadors, and we will find out what their diplomatic imperatives are, what the stories they want to tell about our values, and we help them to curate an exhibition that they're going to live with. They're going to have all their important bilateral meetings in that residence that will help them to accelerate those relationships, because they're on the ground running for 3 to 4 years. They're representing the United States. And in a democracy, you're often pivoting without telegraphing a family fight, but there can be quite a pivot. And so the art is there to help to relay that. And what we did, my husband served in Switzerland for 4 years, which is where I met Andrea and you and others. And what we did was we moved, it was very quiet when you would enter our residence, and we requested that they move the sound system to the front entry hall. And that again was just this intuitive feeling that we wanted to have people lifted up. And what did we think of but music? And now we have all the evidence of why that is actually the case.
Definitely. I mean, given its mission of soft power, I would say, how do you think Art and Embassies measure the impact of its cultural diplomacy efforts on promoting awareness of the therapeutic power of the arts? We talked about initiatives like the Creative Growth Collection that uses art therapy for individuals with developmental disabilities. Do you think this reinforces the critical societal value of Art and Embassies?
Yes, and we are putting together collections from very important cultural institutions. We'll be announcing one soon. But I can't talk about. But we are going to be putting together these large collections under long-term loans. And one of the very first organizations that we went to was the Creative Growth Foundation. I don't know, or centers. I don't know if you've heard of them, but when California shut down the mental health institutions, the Black Panthers were very involved in realizing this was going to be a real problem for people who need healing. And so they created art centers. They didn't have all this data you have today, but they did understand that. And the art that has been generated by creative growth is considered very important art now, their collection over many decades. And they've been at the MoMA, the San Francisco MoMA. They did an international tour that I saw in Europe called the Museum of Everything. And so now our ambassadors will be choosing creative growth art pieces to put in their embassies. As we go into our 250th year, we're going to be talking a lot about democratic values. And so we'll be able to tell the story of the power of the arts for neurology, for our health, but we'll also be able to talk about the value of diversity and equality and all of those things that a creative growth artwork will initiate, those kinds of discussions. So we're very excited about that.
No, it's amazing. I think it's a great way to bring community and to represent, I think, the US all over the world. And to connect people, which I think is the most important part of diplomacy.
And we actually did something this summer. I don't know if we have time to tell this story, but Joan Baez is actually painting now. And so one of her pieces was at the home of the Human Rights Council ambassador in Geneva. And believe it or not, the Human Rights Council is a council that is rife with lots of conflict, and it's often very difficult to agree. And now they're all very good-hearted people and very concerned with humanitarian issues, but it's a very difficult terrain. So our ambassador asked us to bring Joan Baez, who is a world-recognized human rights leader, and she came but told us she wouldn't sing because she didn't do that anymore. She's painting, and so we gathered hundreds of human rights ambassadors and leaders at the UN in Geneva. They all came together, which often they don't, but because of Joan, they did, under this large cedar tree at sunset, and did a dialogue with her. And you could just see the vulnerable conversation that took place, that people were revealing themselves because they related to her as an artist. And at the very end, one of them said, almost with voice cracking, what can we do because of the state of the world today? And she came out with Blowing in the Wind. She sang that song. She's in her 80s. It was so strong, and just sang that song under the tree. And all of us were so united. We should have all had MRIs at that moment because we were completely activated.
Completely. I think the arts brings this out.
So that was, you could just see it happening in real time, the connection and all those things that we need in diplomacy because of the arts.
100%. I mean, I think the last thing I will ask you is to see, how do you incorporate all of this to the emergent scientific insights, into the therapeutic benefits of artistic expression? So how does Art in Embassies bring in music to its exhibitions, to its cultural exchange programs? I think you mentioned it very well through this experience with the Human Rights Watch Council, but how do you think this is happening around the world?
Well, the Department of State has a very large division, Education and Cultural Affairs, and they do a lot in music. And in fact, as I'm sure you know, our Secretary of State is himself a guitarist and musician. And so he has a certain point of view on this. And his wife actually used to run that division of the State Department. So there is a great commitment. But I'm going to go back to Kennedy, if you don't mind. He had appointed Doris Kearns Goodwin's husband to be a White House art advisor. And he felt, I am convinced he was going to start a cultural ministry for the United States, or an office of culture, which we are the only industrialized nation that doesn't have such a thing. But Richard Goodwin said that healthy societies, free societies, are built around a well-supported art and culture sector. And so I don't think it's too much to say, after listening to the conversation today, that for the health of our nation, I am hoping my call to action would be that the United States get a cultural ministry, and that governments around the world at this difficult moment take to heart what you're telling us about the power of the arts, that I think we've always felt intuitively.
Definitely. I think you're completely right. Megan, I thank you so much for being here with us today. It's really evident that the diplomatic platforms can play a huge role in leveraging the therapeutic role of art. So with that, I'm going to now turn to the program back to Andrea Pfeiffer, our chair, and you will be all joining in a group dialogue. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mara. Thank you, Megan. There's a lot to add, and I think, Megan, you should think about it coming back to Switzerland.
I'm coming for Art Basel.
Okay.
I'll call you later.
Very good. Now, building on this sort of diplomatic platforms, which obviously where a lot of things are being done, Maybe we're not yet together. Again, I have a question for René, who sees the world, is one of the probably best diplomat for music. So how do you think platforms like we just discussed can really influence, amplify the therapeutic benefit of music and brain health? What needs to be done to bring this together? Wouldn't that be a nice connection to be a peacemaker as well?
Well, I loved what Megan said about the power of emotion. And there's no question that it really almost requires emotion for people to understand that change is necessary. And, you know, one of my other passions is for climate. And I'm touring with National Geographic, a really beautiful piece now that is moving to people. And I've even had young people say, oh, yeah, we forgot about climate. 5 years ago, that was a really big issue. And obviously, they're distracted by everything that's happening in the world. But the arts have been used throughout our human history for social cohesion. We're very tribal. We're seeing that now in the world today more than we have in my lifetime. And we have to kind of use the arts for good, to creating a cohesion around these issues that need to be rectified. And I heartily applaud you, Megan, for calling out for a Ministry of Culture. Thank you. That would be so important. And as you said, other developed nations already have this and value it. I mean, I would say countries in Europe valued artists during COVID and really supported them, and in a way that we didn't quite see here. They were supporting stages, which is good, presenters, and that was helpful. But the answer to your question is we just have to keep trying and bringing everyone together around strong issues. This networking is important.
Thank you. We are almost coming to the last part of this discussion. And I will ask the same question to all of the speakers. When we reflect on what we heard today, which was very stimulating for me, what is our call? What is your call to action? How do you recommend we build on this dialogue to amplify, advance the therapeutic power of the arts in fostering brain health across the lifespan? Maybe, Rudy, you can start. What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I think besides the great recommendations we've already heard in the last dialogue and just now from René, in terms of the government and national agencies pushing this, there are great foundations out there, programs that are doing this. I work with a foundation called Music Men's Minds, who have just done tremendous things with music and Alzheimer's disease and music and brain aging. There's so many applications. Alzheimer's patients actually do perform better on memory tests after listening to classical music. There's a study that shows that even in patients in general, post-op, after an operation, music can be used to lower blood pressure and stabilize heart rate. So there's so many applications of music. I think we need really buy-in where you have the musicians, the researchers, the government, and the foundations working together to really push this. But I think that there's so much great work going on in some of the private and some of these philanthropic groups and private groups and foundations, and I really, really admire Music Men's Minds among them, that we could see some type of support from the government to expand their programs and get into senior living. You know, I'm working on one big project now to get better diet in senior living. You know, I don't know if you've seen some of the food in senior living, but you know, these folks need better diet more than anybody. But also getting music piped in on a regular basis, and rather than as an option. And you know, it could be music that they loved in their teens. It could be classical music. Better yet, it could be René. But you know, that's what I think we really need, is just like an octopus, just influx and working together.
Megan, I'm asking you the same question, but I'm asking a little bit more because you're sort of closer to the government, or very close to the government. Who should take the lead in this? So we have foundations we just heard, we have lots of scientific studies now, NIH is involved, recognize the importance. Parents, caregivers more and more realize. So how do we bring this all together?
Well, we're getting closer because the National Endowment for the Arts in the last decade, I would say, has really shifted to exploring the economic benefits. You know, I think the case is being made by you on the health front. Government writ large has got to embrace and understand the healing nature of the arts, particularly at a time when we need so much healing. So I think that, you know, those of us who understand this power of the arts and the need for it do need to talk about it and do exactly what you're doing here and what Renee's amazing book does, which is to bring in more people from more sectors. And I am so appreciative of this global brain trust, because you know that seems to be your strategy, and I think that's exactly the way to go. And the closer we can get to an embrace of the arts as a necessity, rather than the icing on the cake.
The last question is to you, Renee. You are already an ambassador for WHO. You're already an ambassador, worldwide ambassador for music. So what's your advice? What's your recommendation? What should be done? I'm seeing from the other side many patients. I'm seeing homes. I'm seeing many things. So how do we quickly distribute this knowledge and actually make it available to the best of our knowledge? I think we know so much about it, but what I don't see yet, that it comes to the patients. So how do we do this?
Right. So we have to remember that this is relatively new in terms of the efficacy of the research, having to do again with technology. So it will take time, certainly in our system, especially, but I would say grassroots organizations, but I think there's an importance around networking because there are so many small organizations, which is why the Sound Health Network, which is a resource center online for everyone to connect with to find out actually what's going on, so there's no redundancy in terms of research. But also NeuroArts Blueprint will start a new global resource center in September. Please look for that, because that will be a watering hole for everyone working in the sector, but it's a much larger umbrella, including all aesthetic experiences. So that's something. So really, the advocacy is important. I wish we had a documentary about this. I wish we had ongoing programming for the public, because ultimately a lot of these things come from the public making demands and saying to their doctors, hey, did you realize, my joke is that I want to see the commercial that says, ask your doctor if music therapy is right for you, because we have so many commercials like that are for drugs. And this is so much better in a way. I mean, even focused ultrasound is a form of music in the sense that it is the fundamental basis for music. And there's a study at MIT that is now testing that you could go to a drugstore and go into a booth and have plaques and tangles cleaned up from your brain with light and sound vibration around 40 hertz. So yeah, the future is very positive. I mean, VR is working well. Oh, see, you've got something.
Yeah, we do it in the lab.
Wow. Yeah. See, Rudy's doing this. I mean, so the future is positive, but right now we need just strong advocacy. So everybody has to advocate for this and tell your doctors. You should be prescribing this. Social prescription is in the UK. It's in a few states in the US. And it's basically where medical professionals would say, okay, what you really need is a park pass. You need to go in the park every day. So, we as humans have not changed in a long time. And we have to remember who we are. And that includes this desire to create, to connect, and to enjoy beauty.
Maybe just a very last question. This is, of course, a global BHP trust where many influential women are participating. Do you think women can play a special role? Rudy, we don't exclude you. We are happy that you are joining us and helping us. But what could there be a special role women could play?
Well, I've done a lot of women's advocacy, and I feel like advocating for arts and culture, somehow there are some similar aspects to it, and I've kind of come to the conclusion if something is very powerful but seems ubiquitous, that it can often be taken for granted and not given enough resources, like women and like the arts. I mean, it's similar. You're trying to make this argument that these things that are obviously so critical are important, and you wonder why you can't. And I think it's because they are thought to be ubiquitous, and we are no threat of losing these things. But I think what you're doing and your strategy of showing the potency and the value of it in science, we're seeing it in the economy, and if we can see it throughout our culture writ large. But what kills me is part of it, what it takes is an inspirational leader like President Kennedy, to just sort of get it. And that would be the shortcut. But I think actually President Biden gets it. I'm not criticizing the current president at all, but it was sort of a miracle that this guy who was president would be listening to Camelot and quoting from Archimedes. And, I mean, it was sort of in his DNA. And so he happened to be president, but it could be anyone. It could be a CEO. It could be, the more leaders we have in all sectors who get this, the better. And right now we have a Secretary of State who completely gets it. And I know the president and Mrs. Biden, she came to Lisbon with us and spoke so passionately. She hosted the Medal of Arts this year. Everything she does, she brings in artists. When they did the Inflation Reduction Act, which was also one of the biggest investments in renewable energies, they had James Taylor come sing Fire and Rain. They always have an artist.
Thank you all. It was a wonderful discussion. I think by recognizing and promoting the therapeutic benefits of the arts, that's why we wanted to come together today, we can create new opportunities for global support in brain health and the prevention of neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer. Stay tuned. We are coming back with other themes, and Rudy will like it. But one of the next one will be gut microbiome and the brain health, which is, of course, also one of my past and something I really, really strongly believe in. With that, we will also send our new newsletter out with a link to this dialogue. You will see it very soon. And my last thing is to thank you all very much and wish you a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you very much.